Welcome to the Oshow. I'm Laura Babcock. The city lied and people died. That is something that Hamiltonians have been aware of for several years. And today, we finally found out the results of a judicial inquiry. Before we get into what was revealed, I first want to say from the Oshow, everyone involved with this program, we can't imagine how the families feel coming into the holiday season and having to relive all of this information. So I just want to give my condolences right off the top, and to all the many, many other people who may not have passed away, but might have been injured on that faulty pavement on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. Joining me right now to break down what was in the report is none other than Joey Coleman. He, of course, is a renowned independent journalist and a Southern Fellow. And Joey has been on this report in the executive summary since it came out today. And Joey, we've done a number of Oshows over the years on this as we've waited for this moment. So welcome to the Oshow, Joey. Any comments you'd like to make off the top? And then can you tell us what they found in this long and expensive inquiry?
Well, the commissioner summed it up while emphasizing that each individual collision is unique and that there are many contributing factors. He wrote, "It is logical to assume that the failure to disclose the trade wind report or the information and recommendations contained within resulted in users of the Red Hill Valley Parkway being exposed to more risk than would have been the cause if the countermeasures had been implemented earlier. For this same reason, it is also logical to assume the failure to disclose the trade wind report contributed to accidents and injuries on the Red Hill Valley Parkway since January 2014.
So they found that the faulty paving was a contributing factor to accidents that they wouldn't have happened necessarily if there hadn't been the problem. But didn't the inquiry also find that had the city not hidden the report that came from the consultant suggesting that the road was faulty, that those accidents would not have happened? I mean, doesn't this confirm what so many of us have been concerned with for years about the city lying and people dying, and open up the city? I know there's already lawsuits, but it sounds to me like the families hearing this tonight, it confirms their worst fears that keeping this quiet contributed to those accidents.
It is correct to say that. The judge does emphasize that in each individual case, we cannot say how much or if friction contributed, but he did say firmly that had the report been actioned when it was received, and had there not been the siloing within Public Works and the lack of organizational structure and the lack of guidelines, just the general incompetence of Hamilton City Hall, that's correct. The ability of one person, Gary Moore, to have this report and not share it was extremely problematic, and the judge did state that the failure of Mr. Moore to carefully review the report and to act on it was a failure of his part, professional misconduct.
Did it say anything about his boss at the time, the former city manager, to have, someone working in that position who would not disclose a report with alarming information in it? Was there any blame spread higher up the chain in the report?
No, and it's an interesting thing with inquiries that they're not so much to focus on blame, they're to focus on how do we move forward. So the strong words against Mr. Moore, the findings that he had significant lapses in his duty, are very strong words coming from a judicial inquiry, which is a fact-finding mission, not a blame-finding mission, and they generally avoid that. Mr. Murray, some things are laid at his feet in terms of the general disorganization. The same with Jared Davis. And, having read through the executive summary, still getting through the chapters that built into that, it appears Dan McKinnon comes out of this report as somebody who was trying unsuccessfully to organize this public works department that was clearly disorganized. We've got discussions in this report about the fact that the city did not have a proactive approach to collision, that it was entirely reactive, that they weren't tracking basic collision data for years. And so Mr. Murray should never be back in City Hall. He should never be feted by a future council. He was the city manager, that allowed fiasco after fiasco in public works. You and I have discussed them repeatedly. It seemed like you could set your watch. Daylight savings happens twice a year, and a public works scandal seems to happen twice a week. And Mr. Davis, Jerry Davis, the general manager, and Chris Murray, the city manager, failed to fix those issues. And frankly, this report speaks to the blatant incompetence and disorganization that lands at the feet of the city manager. Again, not the place of the inquiry to say that. Instead, what the inquiry's job is to suggest things like, hey, when somebody retires, they should, leave behind a memo.
Well, let's get to the recommendations in just a moment. But on the part of the names that were involved here, of course, Chris Murray that you're referring to went on to be the city manager of Toronto for a while, and it was always interesting to me the timing of all of that and when this inquiry started. And for people who are watching from our audience outside of Hamilton, they would be familiar of the story of the road that was paved incorrectly, and the Spectator, to their credit, found out that there was it was actually, I think, an envelope left on the desk, or maybe that was Sewergate. Maybe I'm mixing up our big, huge scandals here in Hamilton in the last couple of councils. But they found out that there was, in fact, a file that was hidden. And when it came out that this had happened, we started to look at all of the deaths on the Red Hill and the many, many accidents. And we started to hear from police and from tow truck drivers and people saying, we always knew it was a mess on that road, right? And the fact that you're telling me now, Joey, that the city wasn't tracking it, that there was disorganization, that when the one guy left, there wasn't even a memo or anything kind of transitioning to the next person in the job of responsibility. I mean, this is public safety. It's an utter disaster. So I take your point that there shouldn't be feting of a former city manager when there was such disorganization in public works, and public works was a mess. I mean, there are multiple scandals in that department over the years, as you rightly suggest. So what about the political piece to this? Because I know the inquiry is not to find blame, but one of the documents that I recall seeing in the inquiry in the early days was that there was a memo, was there not, or an email from Mayor Fred Eisenberger at the time, referencing not, making a public, I think, agenda item about this because he didn't want the media to get aware of it. Is that accurate? Is my recollection correct, Joey?
Yeah, so Mayor Eisenberger was concerned that when council was informed of the scandal, that the way that the in-camera item was denoted on the agenda might tip off observers that there was something significant going on. And a lot of Mayor Fred's initial response was concern about how the public would react to the scandal, but in a way that was unprofessional. It's one thing to say as mayor, let's get the facts together, let's take a breath here, and let's make sure that we explain to the public what's going on. We need to come clean. It's another thing to try to manage that in the way that Fred always did, which was, why tell the truth when you could misdirect? And it's much the same with, the Coots Paradise scandal. It was Mary Fred Eisenberger, Chris Murray approaches to things was, once they were caught, come out and even then try to deflect.
Well, when you say the Coots Paradise scandal,
one of the recommendations.
Sorry, you're cutting out a little bit, Joy. When you reference the former mayor's modus operandi, it was, how much do we really need to go public with, I think, is the summary of what you're saying. And when you say the Coots Paradise scandal, you're referring, of course, to Sewergate, which, the audience across Canada would be aware of that. How many 24 billion liters of mixed sewage that leaked out for years. And when council found out, they voted multiple times not to let everybody know. And it was a big, huge mess. And I think led to the end of the careers of a number of the old guard of council. We'll never know exactly, but they were certainly in trouble when election rolled around. So we've got this inquiry, and again, my thoughts and my heart is with the family tonight who are looking at this and saying, yep, because our city was mismanaged, disorganized, the report didn't come out and didn't get acted on, maybe it was preventable, the death of their children. I mean, what a horrific thing to have to process. And then you've got, the mayor at the time not wanting to alert the media to it, when in fact, the sooner the media found out about something like this, the quicker action could have been taken to help heal and to make sure the mistakes couldn't be replicated. I mean, the accountability on things like this is so critical to make the kind of changes that are needed. Otherwise, they'll keep doing this stuff. And I fought very, very hard, as you know, and many of us did, to get that investigation, to get council to actually invest in it with our money. And I remember they met till like 3 a.m. or something that night in camera, Joey, trying to, I guess, parse out all the other options before they actually went to this step. And so, it's clear why the city did mismanage this situation. If they had of revealed what that consultant said about the road being faulty, it could have ended so much suffering. So now we are where we are, and we'll see what happens with lawsuits. But in terms of the recommendations going forward, what were sort of the high level recommendations, or sort of the theme of the recommendations that the judge came forward with, Joey?
Well, the judge has 36 recommendations, most of which relate to basic governance of a municipality. There isn't anything there that really other municipalities will take away, and that's a difference in the Hamilton inquiry compared to Collingwood, Mississauga, Ottawa. So Ottawa's LRT, Mississauga was procurement, Collingwood was procurement, contracts, conflict of interest, Toronto was the leasing, computer leasing scandal. All of those have recommendations on major changes to how municipalities function. The Red Hill inquiry is, here's how a municipality is supposed to function. So, we got 36 recommendations. I would describe them as 4 primary groups. One is manage your municipal freeways. So who's going to be responsible for the link in the Red Hill? Because one of the problems was everybody had their fingers in the pie and nobody was responsible for the pie itself. 2 is have files, have records management. When people retire, you should have a plan of how you transition retirement to the new person. These are that group of recommendations. Then recommendation group 3, I would describe as basic internal accountability. If somebody's lying, they shouldn't be able to get away with it. How do you prevent people from lying? If they're known to be lying, how do you respond to that? And group 4 is basic separation from professional staff and council and how staff are supposed to function. These are simple recommendations of basic governance, easy to implement. There are 444 municipalities in Ontario. I'm pretty sure that the other 443 have things like when somebody retires, there should be a transition. I thought that the mayor's statement today on this was good.
It was good. And the mayor had nothing to do with this. She came on after all of this had transpired. And it was the right statement to say, well, look at the recommendations, we take it seriously. And she had a heartfelt message for the families out there who are suffering. So I agree with you. I think that's good. So do you have a sense of expectation, though, on tracking that? The sentiment from the mayor was I thought, on point. But how do we know that council is going to actually follow through and make sure that staff, there's a new city manager about to start, how do we know, Joey, that they're going to implement these 36 recommendations so that nobody in the city ever lies like this and causes so much damage to the people they're supposed to protect? Public safety is job one for council. How do we know that they're going to follow through?
So the mayor has stated that the city will have 36 recommendations on their website on a page that tracks implementation.
Good.
He has strong mayor powers now. So as a strong mayor, she can be held accountable for this, and she can be directing the city manager. We are likely a week away from announcing the new city manager. The name's floating out there quite widely now.
Yeah.
And
can you tell us?
I haven't been able to confirm it, and it's not proper to speculate on somebody's career.
Had to ask.
I wish that I was at that point. I'm watching very closely. And I think that, again, these are simple recommendations, such as, has the justice right? Prepare for people's retirements, have transition now, implement a document management system.
It makes me crazy because They're basic. And the executive roles I've had in the past, when I left those jobs, I wanted to do my own gaps analysis for the person who was taking my job so that nothing would drop or be missed. It's just the right thing to do when you care. And so the fact that it wasn't standard or it wasn't done just is part of the tragedy of all of this. So I'm glad to hear that they're going to post publicly the recommendations, track the recommendations, that hopefully will bring some peace to all of the families and the many, we're talking hundreds of accidents. This is not just the families where they lost someone, which is of course the worst, but there were many, many accidents, and many, if you've ever had a car accident, I've had few, it's disruptive to your life. If you have an injury, it can be chronic, it can cost tons in insurance. It's a huge burden. And it sounds as though the city was taking it lightly. And Joey, I know you never do. Thank you so much for being so earnest on this and following it for all these years so much. And we'll, of course, keep in touch. We always appreciate you here on the Oshow. And for those of you watching, our audience locally and across the country, even though the recommendations were specific to Hamilton, if your municipality is not doing these things, find out. Let's learn from each other so this kind of malfeasance never happens again and people don't have to lose their lives over something as stupid as concealing a report and fixing a road. Thank you, Joey. Take care.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow.